Peace be with you all. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for joining us onto this political segment focusing on Lebanon. I'm your host, Batool Subeiti. I'm joined by two very special guests today who are both Lebanese. So we have Marwa Osman and Hadi. It's great to have you both on the show. Hope you're both doing well.
Yes, thank you for having me, and thank you for giving us a platform to talk about this.
Thank you so much for taking out your precious time, as I know you're both very busy. Just a quick intro into them both. So Dr. Marwa Osman is a university lecturer. She's a political commentator. She's a journalist and TV show host for Press TV and Mid East Stream. And we have Hadi Nasrallah, who's a political analyst and researcher with special expertise in Syria and Lebanon. And together, we'll be looking to dissect Lebanon's current crisis from all angles and seeking to understand the root causes of the issues. So when we talk about the situation in Lebanon today, no discussion can be held if we don't understand the nature of the system of governance in Lebanon and essentially how it's been set up. From the sectarian system that is a legacy of French colonialism to the aftermath of the Civil War, where Lebanon was forced into debt, and the role that, of course, America played in stabilizing the lira and pegging it against the dollar so that they're able to control the political decisions. Of course, to the corrupt politicians that represent the interests of external powers, essentially the West and their Gulf regional allies. You may have heard of individuals like Hariri, Jaja, Riyad Salame, etc. Who are these people? What are their roles in the crisis of Lebanon today? Meanwhile, of course, there are concerted media efforts to essentially paint the Islamic resistance of Lebanon as the perpetrators and the reason that Lebanon is held hostage today. And of course, the argument that they use is that if the resistance give up their arms, then Lebanon wouldn't have to be strangled and to have to suffer at all. So what are the phases of conflict that the West, spearheaded by America, have held against the resistance in Lebanon that has led to this point where it feels the need to sanction all of Lebanon as a last resort? And if all fails, will there be an acknowledgement by the West that the balance of forces in the region are simply not in their favor? So if time permits, we will hope to dissect some of these themes, of course, and as always, please do feel free to send in your comments. And if you do have any questions, if we have any time, we might seek to look to go into them. So if I could start off with you, Hadi, if you can just explain to us the system of governance in Lebanon that runs along sectarian lines. How did it come about and why is it just so problematic?
I think to be able to understand the sectarian system that was basically orchestrated by the French colonialism, we need to understand the history of Lebanon, the creation of the State of Lebanon, the Republic of Lebanon, what we call. When the French colonized the region in coordination with the British, who also took some parts of the greater Levantine land, there were debates in what's today called Lebanon. There were even differences and debates and a lot of tension between different sects and different regions about the nature of Lebanon and about if Lebanon should be a state or not. That started, for example, you had the southern Lebanese people refusing to be part of a state called Lebanon. They wanted unity with Syria. And then you have people who accept the Lebanese borders drawn by French people and also some Lebanese influential figures, historic figures, that they were having a somewhat argument about the identity of Lebanon. Is it an Arab state that should be united with Arab countries? Is it just simply Lebanese state that's more Western friendly than it is Eastern? So there was always like this identity conflict between all these people. And then the French came, they got all these people, all these ideologies, all these thoughts, all these different, basically, political views and political, what do you call it, identity politics. They got them all together inside their own borders. Eventually, you're going to have conflict, you're going to have war. And people forget that 1975 was not the first civil war we had. We had one in the 1800s, even before the establishment of Lebanon between the Druze and the Maronites.
Okay.
So it all goes back in history when the people of this specific region used to fight and used to have a lot of conflict because of identity. So what the French did is They neglected all these concerns and all these thoughts, and they got one religious sect, which they were closer to the Maronites, to control over the rest of the 18 different religious sects inside Lebanon, which eventually created chaos, chaos after chaos, where I think it bloomed mostly in the 50s, during the crisis in the 50s, and then leading up to the Civil War in 1975. And of course, then we have, after that, the Taif Agreement, which was even much worse. And they tried to fix it, but it was much worse than the situation before.
Okay. Marwa, is there anything you'd like to add on to that?
Well, yeah, I do agree with everything that Hadi just said, but I'd like to mention that the French, if you will, influence, because this is how they like to like whitewash their aggressive colonialism. The French influence on Lebanon began in the 1600s. And it came about with the religious influence of the church. But later on, like upcoming to later stages, like Hadi was naming specifically 1860, one of the civil wars that happened in Lebanon. We actually have historically 6 civil wars, but 1860 coming up to the First World War, then the Second, and then the which Lebanon did not take part in, but was actually part of the war that was going on in the region. We had French military, we had British military, obviously we had the Ottoman military as well. So we were affected by each of these wars up to the massive crises that were starting to happen in Lebanon, leading up to the 1975 civil war. But that influence, or that occupation, the French actual occupation of this land that was later named as Lebanon, it shifted from a religious one, because during the Ottoman Empire, the French had a deal with the Ottomans that they would actually protect. This is what they thought, that they would be protecting what is called the Christians of the region, despite the fact that, hello, this is the cradle of Christian civilization here, the Levant. But the French, for some reason, maybe other than occupation and capitalism, but anyways, they thought that, well, we will take over that political decision-making process, the economic decision-making process of that swath of land, and break it from Syria. Because what happened from the 40s up till the 70s is very important, financial-wise as it is political-wise as well, because they were able to break us from the financial system in Syria, which brought about all the later financial dilemmas and crisis in Lebanon, presented by the loans, by the international loans, which Syria never took, which Syria never fell for.
Yes.
And hence why they broke us to begin with financially from the central bank of Syria, creating, by the way, the association of banks before even creating the central bank in Lebanon, which tells you about why this association of banks later on is much more influential and powerful than the central bank itself. So all of that was being coordinated by the French colonial power. Obviously, during that time, the British were taking they're going above and beyond in Palestine and in part of Jordan and the southern part of Syria later on. But they were having their own party there, bringing from all over the place people who someone in some book told them that this is their land. Anyways, that's not our problem here. But the issue is that Lebanon was, up until the end of the Civil War, literally in the hands of the the French mandate, the colonials of France. What happened after that, that we can talk about later on, after the Ta'if Accord, was basically the result of the ill coordination, unorganized, unplanned system of governance that was not placed, but that was basically obliged on the Lebanese people without even asking them their opinion, without a referendum, without anything, without even fixing the constitution, which, by the way, is a copy of the French constitution, but in the late 20s, and it never got updated. So a lot of problems that start with the actual so-called independence of Lebanon, which means nothing, to be honest with you, later on to the constant civil wars, the constant clashes and upheavals because of this loss of identity. We don't know who we should be belonging to. And later on to the burden that was created on the shoulders of the public, especially the middle class and the lower classes, with the loans that were brought in by these same colonializers, these same people bringing those same international financial agencies to just make it a heavy burden on the people, to subordinate the people, to make them commit to things that they don't want, or they didn't even have the time to think about whether they want to commit to them or not, which brought us right here to this spot. Our currency is a washed up has been, and we have no economy. Our youth are leaving the country, and we are this close from more clashes.
Absolutely. I think you've both raised some very important points. And it's this idea that, as you both mentioned, you have warlords literally who fought during the Civil War, who almost overnight turned into politicians with this Ta'if Accords. And they were just essentially skilled in pillaging amid crises and have no experience in creating democratic institutions, or let alone a sustainable economy, to the point where Lebanon right now does not have the foundations nor the independence that really allows for a real economy. And the leaders are obviously clinging onto the system to keep their clientelism and their nepotism and their patronage that they can exploit. You both mentioned the Ta'if Accords, which created parallel spheres of influence rather than these strong national institutions. I want us to talk about, and I want us to introduce the figures behind this, just so that the viewers understand. The likes of Rafiq Hariri, and obviously his son, who took over, Saad Hariri, Samir Ja'ja, Riyad Salama. Marwa, if I could start off with you and then move on to Hadi to add for his further comments. Who are these individuals, and specifically, what was their role post the civil war in Lebanon? You spoke a lot about the aspect of debt, but it's reached the point right now where Lebanon has stacked $80 billion in debt. It has one of the largest GDP
So sweet.
ratios
It's
in the
up to
world.
120.
Okay, there you go.
billion.
There you go.
Yeah,
I'm talking about 2019. It's now 120. Absolutely. Yeah, please
well,
go ahead.
look, before I actually start about the people who, if you want, engineered what we are going through today, we need to start before that. It didn't start with the Ta'if Accord. It was way before that. It did not start with the civil war itself, because we need to know what brought this system here. And basically, when we talk about the French mandate and the French colonial system, which made it possible for a couple of families, it's actually less than 100 families who owned what is called the economy in Lebanon. Meaning, what do I mean when I say that? Meaning that the people who were in charge of creating associations that would give out loans for investments for the people to take those investments and then grow an economy, whether it is for agriculture or industry or anything else, those people were put into place by the French mandate. And those people worked hard to break the system of agriculture in Lebanon, because we do have a lot of fields that we could use to break the system of investing in industrial investment or industrial projects by choosing import instead of building an economy. So they chose import, and they worked hard to make the taxes on import be lower than other countries, which would allow the people to say, why should we make this here? Why should we make our own product? We could just import it. It's really not that expensive. So these people who worked in that area were very good friends with the colonials, with the colonizers, which made them even bigger. Money gets more money. Capitalism builds on more fortune. Fast forward to the political issues that happened during 1975. Basically, it was we all know how it started. I'm not going to say how Israel is involved with the Palestinian PLO and how they had to come to Lebanon to flee from the Israeli aggression, and how that all exploded because people wanted to stand with Israel versus stand with their brothers, the Arabs. But that's not the case. The case is people usually think that the disaster, the economic disaster in Lebanon started after the Taif Accord. No, Rafi al Hariri, which is one of the major engineers behind this financial disaster in Lebanon, his name was written in lead spots in 1981, 1982, because he was the main man for Saudi Arabia bringing in weapons for certain parties in Lebanon to
Right.
take
Okay.
part in the civil war. So he was a warlord. He was a man who was basically a delegate for Saudi Arabia starting from the late 70s, early 80s. But he just emerged after the Ta'if Accord as the main man who would just, like you would like come out like a phoenix. I so hate that that term. Like you come out like Lebanon always comes out like a phoenix from under the. No, no, we never did. But he came out to the public this way because he had a project, and that project was being carefully planned out since the beginning of the Civil War, or at least to say 5 years into the Civil War. So he had this plan, and this plan was supposedly to clean out the images of war, of death, of destruction from the capital, Beirut. Never mind the extremities. Don't think about investments. Don't think about making an actual economy. But no, no, just let us put our guns down. Let us come together and let us make the greatest banking sector, not even in West Asia, but in the entire area, including Europe itself. We will be better than that. Better than that in what exactly? The banking sector. Okay, how could a country with a 3 million, I think we were like 3 million population, benefit from a banking sector? Why would that be of any importance? There you go with Riyad Salemi. He was appointed namely by Rafi Hariri, who came to power because of the Saudi influence, which basically the Ta'if Accord created what we know as, later on knew as the scene Saudi Arabia, Syria, who had major influence in Lebanon. So they brought in Rafi al-Hariri. Rafi al-Hariri chose Ilyas Lahrawi as the president, who was basically an employee for Rafi al-Hariri. He used to take a bag every month from Rafi al-Hariri as an employee. And then you had the famous speaker who never knows how to leave, but anyways, the famous speaker in Lebanon who also came about, and the Troika was born. The Troika was born. The Lebanese central bank was given more power by the colonizers by allowing major funding institutions in the world to come up and give us. We started with 4 billion, which then jumped to 12 billion, supposedly to rebuild the country and rebuild the economy. Rafi al-Hariri ended up taking half of it and the other half building what is known as Solidaire, completely destroying the face of Beirut, historical Beirut, the culture of
Yes.
Beirut, driving the people of Beirut out of it. He displaced the Beirutis out of their land, took it. He didn't even pay them back for their land, and that created something that is basically like I think it's more like a monster. It's no longer a city, and it's empty.
Absolutely.
And it created the big banking sector, which they kept taking award after award for it, despite the fact that many economists were saying since 1993 that this form of financing, putting money into a country without actual planning, without an actual economic plan, industrial or agricultural one, to bring out the best of the economy in this country, just waiting on money to be given to us, and then this money going into the pockets of this less than 100 families and these politicians to become more influential of the people, and then throwing a couple of bucks every time there's an election. This will not create a country. It will bring us back to sectarianism, nepotism, civil war. There you go. During all that period, we also had consecutive Israeli aggressions against Lebanon,
Yes.
breaking our electricity system of electricity, breaking our infrastructure time and time again, along with a lot of havoc in the country, assassinations and terrorism later on. But basically, this system was put into place while people were killing one another in the 80s, but it just came out as the perfect paper that would bring everyone together and just cut the country like a piece of pie for everyone to take his sizable pie out of it, and leaving us to what we know now as the worst economy in history and the worst financial crisis in history.
Absolutely. So much to think of there. Hadi, is there anything else you'd like to add onto what
I
Marwa
think
has just
pretty
said?
much Marwa covered everything important when it comes to the Taif agreement. I'm just gonna add one thing, which is the most complicated part of that Taif agreement is the current political alliances in the government, which are very contradictory and they do not make sense in any way by both sides, which is making it difficult for anyone to do actual change. So when Marwa mentioned the Troika, and basically there's a person that people keep forget mentioning, or he's shied away a lot. His name is Jumblat. He's one of the main orchestrator of the collapse as well, but he's always
Yes.
shied away. Uh, him, the parliament speaker, and Hariri were basically the main people
You don't
behind the
even say
collapse.
his name, by the way.
Who was the parliament speaker, Hadi?
Nabih Berri.
There
So
you
yeah,
go.
so they're the main orchestrators behind the collapse. And
Yeah.
if you notice something, the main opposition for that so-called agreement and the savior of Lebanon is the current president Michel Aoun. Although he himself also is responsible for a lot of bad things that happened throughout history in Lebanon, but now he is in alliance with the Lebanese resistance and trying to fix the economy and trying to get Lebanon out of this subjugation towards the West and the Gulf Arab countries. But the main problem is here that many powerful people who are allied also with the resistance oppose what Michel Aoun is doing, and they oppose him to be president as well. This is putting the resistance in a very tricky situation and putting the supporters of the resistance in an even more tough situation. There's nothing we can do about it. I mean, you're making us decide between breaking alliance with an important faction in Lebanon and or supporting. So basically, both sides are going to lead you to breaking an alliance with an important faction in Lebanon. You're either going to use the half part of your own sect, or you're going to lose a greater part from another sect that's actually covering you, giving you a legitimacy umbrella in the international community to some extent,
Mm.
not a lot. So I think that okay, the Taif agreement is very bad. It's not gonna take us anywhere. It's gonna take us to another civil war, but it's just postponing it. But the current alliances are what's making this much worse. And unfortunately, I don't think there's a solution to those alliances because we have no other choice when it comes to that. So the
But
resistance
I
and
think
the
I would add one thing, Hadi, which actually broke somewhat the Ta'if Accord without uh, maybe being some sort of like doing it on purpose, was the big alliance between Hezbollah and the Free Patriotic Movement in 2006, which
definitely,
basically through Taif, it was the first bullet at Taif. But they were
yep,
not thinking about that. They were thinking, I mean, Hezbollah was thinking that we need someone to take our back, to defend us in Lebanon and the international community. And President Michel Aoun, at that time, General Michel Aoun was, he came, like it was a year after he came back to Lebanon from exile. And he had these ideas about what was going on in Lebanon. And then he landed and he saw that those ideas were not right. And he saw that an alliance with Hezbollah would actually empower his political bloc in Lebanon. That was the first bullet against the Ta'af Accord, because the Ta'af Accord was put in place to divide. This is for the Maronites, this is for the Sunnis, this is for the
Yeah.
Shias. Khalas, that's it. But
mm,
that alliance was the first thing that broke it, which showed a lot of the faults, a lot of bad things in the Ta'af Accord. Sorry.
yep. And actually, because of that alliance between Hezbollah and the FPM, led by General Michel Aoun, that led the other bloc to actually have this unity between the future movement and Lebanese forces, which is the most contradictory alliance you can ever think about. And today, the results are showing today how they are against each other and how both are criticizing each other in the open, both Jaja and Hariri. And there's somewhat now like a lot of hostility between them. Their alliance couldn't last, unlike the alliance of the
Yeah.
resistance and the
The
choice of the
first man
resistance.
who dropped Hariri like a hot potato was Samir Jaja when Mohammed bin Salman kidnapped the man. He like dropped it in less than 24
He
hours.
slapped him.
And that's
What kind of an
allies for you.
agreement is that?
What kind
Yeah.
of an
Yep,
allies are they?
yep.
Absolutely. Hadi, how you've mentioned the resistance, and I want to speak about them for a little bit. How have we gotten to the stage where the Islamic resistance in Lebanon that you mentioned has become the primary target, and all inherent corrupt entities that we've discussed are essentially forgotten or are placed in the back? Can you explain to us, firstly, what are the phases of confrontation that the West and their allies have waged against the resistance? And how did we get to the situation that we are in today, where essentially the whole country is being strangled economically? And why are they being strangled?
All right, so we're gonna start with the resistance. I think everyone by now they know all the methods, all the sanctions, all the wars, all everything that was waged against the Lebanese resistance, Hezbollah, and everything they did against them, against their members, against their leaders, against their party in general, their political wing. But the most important, the most dangerous thing that's happening right now is the aim towards their support base. And it's basically generalizing an entire sect in Lebanon, an entire base, into labeling them as basically a terror organization based and aiming towards them with sanctions, with siege, with a lot of pressure internationally, especially like what the Arabs are doing, like Arab countries are doing somewhat under American influence, of course, what they're doing to people just because they are Shia. They're being
Okay.
thrown away of the country just because they want to pressure Hezbollah. So I think that's the most dangerous part, how they're aiming towards the resistance.
Has it got to do with being Shia or being pro-resistance? Because you can get people who are
in
Shia that are anti-resistance.
in the Gulf, is they don't care if you're pro or with. They throw away the Shia just to pressure the resistance. So they don't. So this is a strategy. And actually, the recent papers that were released by the U.S. during the airports, how they were basically questioning people. One of their lines in the U.S. guidelines in the airport is if they look Shia coming from
We have
Lebanon.
a
That
way
was,
to look. Do I look like a Shia now for
I
you?
mean, they have, if they have a Shia look, that's in official U.S. papers how they're trying to label and dehumanize the
I would
resistance
sue.
population in
I
Lebanon.
would sue the hell.
Yeah,
I would
yeah.
sue.
And the most actually worst thing that they're trying now to strip us of our Lebanese identity. That's the main thing. We are an Iranian diaspora group that lives in
Yeah.
Lebanon. We are not Lebanese. Hezbollah's not Lebanese. Whatever happens, it's against Lebanon. It's against the cedar. It's against the flag. It's against the tree. We're not. This is what they're doing right now, trying to label Hezbollah as a foreign occupation in Lebanon that has nothing to do with Lebanese culture or identity or heritage. And we got here because I think uh, after the liberation in the year 2000, when Hezbollah succeedingly kicked the Israelis out, Israel tried their one military shot after that. It was in 2006 to get back at Hezbollah or to end them completely. And that was under the blessing of many Lebanese sides and many Arab and regional sides as well. They failed to do that miserably, and they lost a lot of, what do you call it, a lot of influence in the region after that. The next level was, okay, we couldn't get rid of Hezbollah because of their allies in Syria. Let's get rid of Syria. They went to Syria. That didn't work. It made things worse. It gave Hezbollah a lot of expertise in the guerrilla battle and a lot of weapons, a lot of axes from Lebanon towards Iran. That's the whole road for them. Now what they're trying to do is like trying to suffocate the entire country economically. And okay, the resistant base might understand that this is the price of the war, but other factions in Lebanon, they don't understand that. They're going to blame Hezbollah, whether we like it or not. And Hezbollah, unfortunately, a lot of public figures in Lebanon, they were supportive. Now they're in the UAE, Saudi camp, just because of the economic. They couldn't handle it. They couldn't deal with it. They think that all of that is happening because of Hezbollah. They can fight corruption. Some of them claim that they're against everyone, كلهم يعني كلهم, and they have the corruption side. We're gonna fight it, and then we have the weapons of Hezbollah that we need to have a solution for. But that's not the main thing that they want. It's more about there's a word for it in Arabic, يعني مثل prestige. How do you say that? They care about Lebanon. They don't care if Lebanon is
Haiba.
suffering economically. The important thing is that they can live. They can show what Lebanon is like, the look of Lebanon. They don't care about what's inside. They don't care about a strong economy, even if it's
They want the fake
this
bubble.
exactly. They
They
want the
want that
fake bubble. They don't want Lebanon to be part of an Eastern Union. They want Lebanon to be this hub of nightclubs, westernized products, all that, even if it's all debt. So we have a saying in Lebanon, the Lebanese بياخد دين لا يسهر, like we take debt just to go have fun at night and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that is the culture that is ultimately
I just
the
wanted to say
internalization
something.
of slavery. But yes, Marwa, please.
But I wanted to say something concerning the aggressive attitude towards the Lebanese in the Persian Gulf Arab states. That the way they face that when they don't care, you're Lebanese, they don't care who you are, khas, you're Lebanese, you definitely have to be affiliated to Hezbollah, which is ridiculous, because if you just follow the process to get a visa to get to one of these countries, they just want more like a biopsy of your liver. That's what they're gonna ask for next. Yeah, they ask for paperwork to a point that they know who you are, who your entire family is. They know if there is a Hezbollah member in your family or not. We're literally 4 million people, so everyone knows everyone else. But the issue is, it doesn't matter even if you are against the resistance, because there are a lot of people who are actually against the resistance. That's their choice. We are a free country. It's fine. They're allowed to have a free choice, but they are not allowed to oblige that free choice on us, to make us adopt that free choice. We are living here. We are the people under the Israeli aggression. We are the people suffocating because of the Israeli American imposed unilateral punitive measures. They are not called sanctions because they are against the law. They are unilateral punitive measures. Since we are living here, we get to decide what we do, since we already tried your part of the cake. You're gonna have to try our part, because we did try your International Monetary Fund, and we tried your trust in the banking sector, and we tried your trust in the warlords and in the family franchise turned into politicians. We don't want that anymore. We had enough of that. But the issue is that they tried to demonize the entire country simply, Batool, because we were able to. I think that we are the only Arab nation, native population in the part of West Asia, that we were able to kick out the colonizer, the occupation. We kicked them out. We won
Unconditionally.
war against the most, what they call themselves,
undefeatable army.
Undefeatable army in the region. And we fought against the only democracy in the Middle East. Talk about a democracy that has no borders, no constitution, and is racially abusive and an apartheid state. I mean, come on. But the issue about Lebanon right now, when we talk about whether they would suffocate the entire people for trying to like stop the resistance or disarm the resistance, or put a halt on the resistance work, I personally think this is the last card that they have, that they can actually use, because they have zero cards after that. Look at what they're doing with Syria. They admitted that they were defeated in Syria. Hence, we saw the new opening up to Damascus that happened yesterday. They have no other card right now except to suffocate us, except to try and punishes us, collectively punish the Lebanese population, whether you are with Hezbollah or not, to create more pressure against it. But I just they failed to understand that these people are going nowhere. They're not going to change their mind, and normalization will never happen as long as there's resistance in Lebanon.
If anything, they're getting stronger. The resistance has only proved itself to get stronger and stronger with time. Absolutely. Very important points being raised. I think, as Hadi, as you were describing the different tools, so you mentioned military warfare and then economic warfare. This issue of tribunals, I think, is also an interesting and important card that they have used. So previously, before they closed the Hariri tribunal case, that's something that did come to my mind when you were speaking, Hadi, in terms of the tools used by the West to kind of provoke their political interests. It was essentially something that was on the shelf, and the enemies of the resistance activated it when they deemed fit. And as the leader of the resistance party labeled the Hariri tribunal as an opportunity for Israel to achieve its unachievable goals in Lebanon, that's as he put it. Marwa, can you explain to us whether the Beirut port explosion that happened in 2020, the investigation that was subsequently formed, how and whether that is being utilized essentially as a political tool in the same manner that the Hariri Tribunal was. And especially for those who aren't aware of the proceedings of the investigation, how is it being conducted, and is it problematic at all, essentially?
Well, let us begin about the tribunal for the Rafiq Hariri assassination, which came out a couple of years back, and or was it last year? I don't know. COVID just changed everything. I lost track of years. But the result of the tribunal, after 15 years of us paying for that useless tribunal and of this political and sectarian pressure and tension that was built up in the country, it turned out that no, Hezbollah was not part of the assassination. Hello, we told you 15 years ago, but
And Syria.
And neither Syria was either, and despite the evidence that actually points to the Israeli occupation, but that's not the case here. But I just want to say that despite the fact that all of this evidence was put forward and all of this effort was gone, it went down the drain. At the end of the day, even that tribunal was not able to get one evidence to blame the Islamic resistance in Lebanon. Now, fast forward to the horrific, tragic events of August 4th, 2020. Every single soul in Lebanon wants an investigation because every one of us lost someone or was about to lose someone. And a lot of us actually had either lost a friend, a mother, a father, or collateral damage that broke their businesses and their lives. So every one of us, yes, we want to know who is responsible, and we already know who is responsible because it's something that's obvious. It has to do with the people who allowed the shipment in, with the people who gave the okay for the shipment to be, for the stockpile to actually be stored in the port of Beirut, and then who delayed for this shipment to be taken out of there because it was a hazardous substance that could cause what it caused, and the people who were responsible, all the signatories for that. So we're talking about judges, we're talking about the Lebanese military, we're talking about members of parliament, we're talking about ministers, we're talking about presidents and prime ministers who all have jurisdiction in that. So our problem is not the investigation, because we know that Hezbollah has nothing to do with the port, because even if you are an affiliate of the Lebanese forces, part of the Jaja thuggish movement in Lebanon, even if you are an LF, you know that Hezbollah actually has nothing after the border from Esqua downtown. Nothing, zero. Okay, especially in the port. But the issue is not about the actual investigation. The issue, neither about the calling of allies of the resistance. I mean, if they listen to the speech of Sayyid Nasrallah, who criticized Tariq Bitar, he said, we want you to continue the investigation, but we want you to call everyone involved in the investigation. We don't mind you calling for Ali Hassan Khalil or Zaitir or whoever, these figures who are either affiliated to Hezbollah or very close allies to Hezbollah. We don't mind. If they are responsible, we're not going to hide them. They have to take full responsibility. But why are you only shooting at them? Why are you only summoning them? Why are you only issuing subpoenas after them? You have, I mean, look at the prime minister now, Najib Mikati, who was the prime minister when these stockpiles of ammonium nitrate entered the port. He became he was a prime minister. And we all voiced, supporters of the resistance voiced our disagreement and discontent and disapproval of Najib Mikati. But it is not in Hezbollah's hands to place the prime minister. It's in the hands of the Sunnis of Lebanon. Hello, Ta'if Accord. The same way that if now, for any reason, anything happens that changes the position of the speaker, it is the Shias who control the speaker position because of the Ta'if Accord. So it doesn't need any, it doesn't need physics or astrology to actually figure out how to, it's not space engineering. It's just a Ta'if Accord that divided the power sharing in Lebanon. So it's not in the hands of Hezbollah to bring a prime minister who is actually responsible and bears the responsibility of the Beirut port explosion. So the issue is not about the investigation. It's about politicizing the investigation. It's about just taking that big circle and then just cutting one piece of it and saying, okay, these people are responsible. How on earth is that something logical? Just
Clearly
tell me, is
biased.
that, yani, if that was sensical and logical, everyone would be behind it, because the people who died are from each and every sect in Lebanon. So basically, that's what happened. That's why
Absolutely, absolutely.
yeah. I'm sure
Thank you,
Hadi has
Marwa.
something to say
Yeah.
about because I saw a couple of tweets by Hadi that he was saying that we don't need to like talk ill of the judge or anything, but and I know that every one of us wants the investigation, but at the end of the day, when the Congress comes out and starts giving good word of mouth about a judge in Lebanon, my eyebrows were like, what?
Something's
Yeah,
fishy.
exactly. I mean, for me, I think Marwa already knows that I have a little different views when it comes to Judge Bitar and Hezbollah's position on the matter. Not because I think what the resistance is doing is wrong, but because I believe the resistance is taking too much responsibility than they should. It's not their, I don't believe that it's their job to put on full cards just to protect their allies or just to protect up what's coming. I think, for me personally, I think that they should defend themselves and the resistance should stop being the shield for those people. And I agree with the resistance on something very important that Mr. Nasrallah said, which is okay, we are with you with the investigations, Bitar, we are with you, what you're doing. But why aren't you investigation? Who brought the nitrate, ammonium nitrate? Who brought them? This is what we want to know. Okay, we know who already knew. They already confessed. They said that they got the letters. They know that there was ammonium nitrate being stored in the port, but we don't know who brought the ammonium nitrate. And there's a lot of speculations and a lot of proof that where they came from. A lot of names of companies and fake companies, even in the UK, that are responsible for that. All this information is available for the internet surfers, but for some reason, our judge can't seem to link the dots and find out who brought the ammonium nitrate to Lebanon. And
Maybe he
there's
doesn't want
something
to
that
link the dots.
yeah, and there's something that I need to highlight is that when you said that the warfare shifted towards tribunals, and it's important to mention that the tool during Hariri's tribunal was basically political, called the 14 March Alliance with Jaja, and Hariri and Jumblat, all this
Lot.
political alliance. Now the tool is civil. They're they've had enough of their political allies in Lebanon because they couldn't do anything. They couldn't
Yes.
succeed in any way against
NGOs.
Hezbollah. Now it's the NGOs and the this Mujtama al-Madani, where you call that civil
Yeah.
society, and
Yes.
all these groups that are pro-revolution, pro-change, but for some reason they only aim towards Hezbollah and the their support base as a whole, and the Lebanese president and his support base as a whole.
I would
Only.
like to say something, because I'm actually working every Thursday, actually every other Thursday. I have on Clubhouse a meeting with a group of young Lebanese. Well, Lebanese women, not only young women, called لأنني أنثى, and I'm talking about the NGOs in Lebanon.
Oh,
So
yeah.
tomorrow I have a second case, and while I was doing my research, I saw that one of the STL, the Special Tribunals for Lebanon, held special training for a lot of NGOs, starting with the tribunal. So starting from 2005, they were holding
Okay.
special trainings for NGOs in Lebanon and it's for basically helping them understand how the process of the tribunal works and how they should be watchdogs for anything that happens, that they could get evidence for the special tribunal. Who are they again? The non-governmental organizations, funded by who again? Funded by international states, international humanitarian
USAID.
organizations, and so basically the US, France, and the UK.
Absolutely. And all issues with Lebanon stem from being captive to external entities, or those
Exactly.
corrupt warlords who then became politicians having those external backings and that external power base.
And there's something
By
I'm
the
gonna add
way,
that
the opposing debate would always be, well, Hezbollah is Iranian. People fail to understand that we have the full right as a native population to actually make alliances with other natives in our region to protect ourselves from imperialism and colonialism. I mean, the
Exactly.
US can bring 82 countries to fight Syria, but we can't have an alliance with 3 or 4 countries to defend ourselves.
I mean, notice the people who claim that the resistance based on Hezbollah are Iranian, the same ones who are proud of their what do you call, of the everything they did during the civil war, of all their achievement in the civil war. They were all backed and armed and trained, and even by foreign forces. And those foreign forces were actually present in Lebanon, fighting with them. At least when it comes to Hezbollah, they're just getting aid from Iran, and they're not being ordered around. Or we have Iranian presence in Lebanon with an entire like a military field, like what the other side did with the Americans and the Israelis and the British, and probably the Saudis in the future. You never know.
And no, they don't
Absolutely.
make us learn Persian, and no, we don't have to drink the Iranian tea with the
And no, we're
fine.
not all religious, and no, they're not forcing people to be Shias.
Yeah, and no, not all my brothers are religious, and no, not my sisters are not even hijabis. No, they don't force us with a gun to our heads. I actually fought my parents to wear the hijab. There you go.
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
the fact that we even feel the need to say this right now.
It's
exactly.
Hadi,
ridiculous. Yeah.
Hadi, I want us to explore the so-called revolution, as I like to put it in those parentheses, of October in 2019. Things seem to be a lot worse than they were in 2019. Instead of progressing, Lebanon has just been retaliating. Forget about what even the protesters were demanding. It got to a point, as we discussed, where direct killings were being enacted to literally plunge the country into a civil war. Can you maybe talk to us a little bit about the role of the American sponsorship, that the role it has actually played in the name of fighting corruption, and how it's managed to mobilize the people on the streets in the direction that they want?
All right. I'm gonna be as honest as I am, and you're gonna like it because I'm gonna say what I actually observed and I thought they were suspicious, but I never mentioned them because I was too angry the first few days. So when we first went to the street, I was there since like the first minute. I just saw people coming down, I just went down because that's what we do. And it was an actual, I'm not gonna call it a revolution, let's just say like massive protest. It was chaotic.
Phenomenon.
People, yeah, it was amazing. Like was the first time I ever feel all the Lebanese people are joined together under one flag. That was the first time I ever had that feeling. That's why we were disappointed, because we wanted that feeling to be true, to be real. We're gonna make a change as Lebanese, no other flags. The first 3 days, I didn't see anything suspicious. The fourth day, when we were that calls were being chanted against the weapons and Hezbollah and stuff. I mean, I didn't think it was that suspicious because it was expected, to be honest, at this point, because all Lebanese are here and we're not all from the same political background. But then it was starting to get serious when
Systematic.
suddenly, out of nowhere, you have all these pages, all these websites, or like Megaphone, and a lot of NGOs as well. Suddenly, all they emerge on Instagram and Facebook, and like they're being sponsored, and I'm seeing them, and a lot of followers, comments. Like, where did you come from? And they've been this established literally days before, and they have all this popularity. And then a few days later, I started seeing the same organizations, but present on the ground and building their own stages, having their stands. Uh, you have these tents as well. Each tent have an ideology. You have the leftists and the rightists and the liberals and it was bound. We were bound to have a civil war if this didn't stop, because there were more than 20 different ideology on the same street, and we're fighting. Like, I'm gonna give you an example. You had some people chanting, "Get the president out! Get us more refugees." You had the right-wing Lebanese. They were so angry they attacked those people and they were screaming again. Like something as simple as that, we almost had a fight because of it. So what Hezbollah leader Nasrallah saw that, although he was a bit supportive the few days, he didn't say anything wrong about it. He said that, okay, this is getting a lot suspicious and might be dangerous. He didn't accuse anyone of anything. He called only on his supporters to leave the streets just so people don't get dragged. And of course, I have to mention that before that there were a lot of fights. So you have the supporters of political parties came to the streets and attacked the protesters
Protesters.
on many occasions, and there were clashes between both sides, and people feared that weapons might come out. I mean, anyone can start a war in Lebanon. You can have, let's say, a side that's not Lebanese. He can come masked, shoot one guy. he can just leave and the civil war would
Everyone has
eventually.
guns.
It's an
Yeah.
open ground for conspiracies.
Yeah, and the biggest example was what happened recently in Ain al-Rumani. Those guys who went to defend themselves, that was not Hezbollah or Harakat Amal decision. They went there because they felt like they need to fight for themselves
Spur
or
of the
get the anger
moment
out.
reaction.
Yeah, that proved how dangerous and fragile Lebanon is. I mean, you can't control supporters if something like that happen.
Yeah.
So, and American, of course, from the first day they were oppressing their own protests in Lebanon in the U.S. From before,
But
and then they
supporting
said,
us.
yeah, but they said the Lebanese have the freedom to protest, and Hezbollah must not attack civilians. Hezbollah was not attacking anyone. The supporters of Hezbollah maybe were angry and they came attack, but it was all aimed against Hezbollah. Whatever happens, it's aimed against Hezbollah in general.
You know,
Absolutely.
I figured it out. I was really happy, just as Hadi was, and really I was proud of the moment because I took part of it for 7 days. I actually left before Sayyid Nasrallah asked the supporters of the resistance to leave, but I'll tell you why.
You had that vision ahead.
No, I had a fight. I'll tell you about it. The first day, actually October 19. I took permission from the university that I teach in 2 different universities. So I took permission from Ma'arif University, which is Hezbollah University. So I took permission from the university because I wanted to take a couple of students wanted to come with me. So I was like, can we go down as Ma'arif? And they said, for sure you can. By all means, go ahead, take the students. And they actually got us a minivan that would drive us there and bring us back. So we went down there and we were very organized. We had our quotations were very clear. We demanded for the Riyad Salame to be basically tried and incarcerated, please. We demanded for all the necessary demands for anti-corruption demands. So we put them on placards and we went down to Riyad Salah. And first, it was just the first 10 minutes. I was approached by a man who does not even speak Arabic, asking me who I am and where I'm coming from. I was like, excuse me, show me your ID. Who are you? I was being asked, because I'm a hijabi woman and most of the women with me were hijabis, we were asked why we were there and who do we represent. It's like, excuse me, we're Lebanese, who are you? That was the first red flag. The second red flag was the constant use of vulgarity that we were not used to. Lebanon has always seen protests against everything. Everyone protests against everything. We have never, ever seen such vulgarity, such use of really bad words, really bad mouthing on the streets. When we have children, you have women. Yes, we are a conservative community, despite the fact that we are diverse, but it was out there that it's just
too much.
It was just close enough for them to add 2 liberals on their head. So we could understand that they were actually
They did worse than that, by the way.
Liberal camp. And which is basically the book of NGOs. This is how the book of NGOs works. The third red flag was, which led me to pull out on the 7th day, because I changed, because of all vulgarity, I decided I don't want to go down there anymore. I'm going to the basic, the main problem in Lebanon, which is the central bank. So I went to the central bank. While I was there, it was the Communist Party who had the first camping site, if you will, at the central bank. And I had a fight with them. Why? Because I just had a card that said, joke of the revolution, Samir Jaja is part of the revolution. I had that up there, and apparently I think it was either I forgot whether it was Al Arabiya or NBC, or I don't know which one of them was actually shooting there. And one of the guys came and told me to get that placard down. We don't want to be demonized. I was like, who are you and why are you asking me to do something that has nothing to do with you? So we had a couple of, we exchanged it, and I spoke in English on purpose, and I made one of my students take a video of it because I wanted to show the world that even when you are actually supporting something that you believe in, you are still influenced by the bad imaging that could come up because of the mainstream media. You are still bounded without, and freedom is being taken away from you because you're afraid that one of these media outlets might actually take a photo and then brand you as someone who is close to Hezbollah, when it has nothing to do with Hezbollah. I just said Samir Jaja thought of himself as one of the revolutionaries in Lebanon. That's the joke of the revolution. So because of that, I was like, you know what? I'd rather go back to my children and not spend one more minute with you because you don't know why you are here. And then I went back home. Then 2 days later, Sayyid Nasrallah said that the supporters of the resistance, it was, for me at the beginning, I didn't really understand this decision. But later on, as Hadi explained, I was able to see what he was seeing. But it was where days, even weeks later. And it just went downhill from there. And they never asked for Riyad Salame to be at least be investigated. They never said, why are we pegged to the dollar? They never said why our system of taxes is such a rogue one that doesn't go by taxing the rich. It only taxes the poor. They never said anything about privatizing the public sector. They never said anything about the import-export law, which is ridiculous. And a lot of more issues, especially issues related to the constitution and to the system of electoral votes in Lebanon, which is a sham in Lebanon.
Yes.
So
Yes.
none of these demands that each and every one of us wants them changed. They just want Hezbollah out. And Hezbollah is part of the corruption. I don't know how they don't have anyone working in any of the ministries or any of the public associations or institutions. They want Hezbollah not to meddle with the decision-making process of the judiciary system and of the syndicates. Hezbollah has, like, we actually, supporters of the resistance, we actually demand of them, get your stuff together and go be part of the syndicate system in Lebanon. And they refuse because they don't want to hear about it, and they still hear about it. So there you go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's really interesting. This idea that it started off with slogans and then nothing really happened on the ground. And then they almost make you forget about those initial slogans by then distracting you.
And not only
then
that, and
very
when their incitement of sectarianism and of not only sectarianism of like breaking the same sect itself, when our camp loses people, they don't say a word. They don't even say that it was a tragedy. They don't even mention it. They continue their lives normally. None of the NGOs that actually support women's rights spoke about Maryam Farhat, who was sniped inside of her own kitchen, basically because she's a hijabi woman, because the sniper is a fascist, right-wing, I don't want to say any more words,
revolutionary.
but I mean, that's why he's a criminal. He's a terrorist. It was an act of terrorism that what happened in Tayuni. Not a word. Why? By the way, Samir Jaja would have won the media war if he was smart enough not to put snipers on rooftops. Because if it was only just clashes on the streets, he would have won the media war. But he's such a psychopathic warmongering warlord that he had them prepared 2 days earlier, killing just unarmed protesters in the streets, which led to people just in the spur of the moment defend themselves and go and get weapons. I'm against the use of weapons internally in Lebanon, but it was not upon a decision by any of the political movements in Lebanon. It was simply a spur of a moment defending a strategy of defending oneself. And if you watch the videos, you could see that it was like, who are you shooting at? You're actually shooting the building in front of you. You're not even a certified person to hold a weapon. What are you doing? And they don't even know how to use the weapons. But that happened, which proves that a clash can happen in any street in Beirut that would lead us back to 1975.
It's that fragile. Absolutely. I think before I close this off, I just want to touch upon one last theme, and that is what happened in relation to the Gulf states pulling out their ambassadors from Lebanon. And this followed, one after the other. After the so-called after the comments that Al-Qardahi made, because I'm pretty sure they won't base such an important decision and policy on the comments someone made.
He said the war was absurd. How dare he?
Absolutely. Absolutely. My question is, and I think I'll start off with you, Hadi, and then we'll move on to Marwa. Do you think that this decision that the Gulf states have made, as they've sought to cut diplomatic ties from Lebanon, do you think that this is an indication that the American strategy, or they feel like they've been defeated and this is a kind of declaration of defeat of Western agenda, because there's no other way that I can explain withdrawing in that kind of manner except defeat, or if they feel like that's another way for them to further cause chaos. What are your thoughts?
I think, first of all, we need to establish that what happened between Lebanon and the Gulf regimes is that had nothing to do with what Qardahi was saying, because what Qardahi said was said before in Lebanon by Nabih Berri, by Jumblat, who was an ally to Saudi Arabia. It was even said by the EU, it was either said by the UN. And the idea that the Gulf regimes cut ties with Lebanon because of Iran, I mean, you yourself are having talks with Iran. Yes, just yesterday, the UAE went to Damascus and spoke to Iran's primary ally in the region, Bashar al-Assad, and still they have the audacity to say that what they're doing is basically just to fight off Iran in the region. And for me, from like a personal perspective, can you hear me? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So for me, from a personal perspective, is what happened between Lebanon and the Gulf state is something that I do not regard as a loss, and I don't see it as something that shouldn't happen, because I think it's a way for Lebanon to break all the ties and break the siege of its independence to the Gulf region. So now they're giving Lebanon a chance to actually grow by itself and find another substitution for its economy to save itself. And I don't believe that America is pretty much involved in that. I think it's just a Saudi gesture to save face after they lost in Yemen and after that happened.
Okay, interesting. Marwa, is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, I basically would like to say that, Al Saud are not asking for much. They did said just kick Qardahi out and just let Hezbollah bring down their arms and let Hezbollah leave Syria and let Hezbollah leave existence. That's only what they want. It's something that can actually have. I mean, the Saudis have a big problem in actually trying to portray what they want. Can you tell me, Mr. Mohammed bin Salman, what's really disturbing you at this moment in time? Why are you creating yourself a crisis that does not exist? You actually want the world to believe that this is because of something that was said by a minister before he was even a minister, when Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah himself in 2015, when you started the war in Yemen, called you rogue regime, rogue Al Saud. He called you all the names that could actually provoke you to cut ties with Lebanon, and you did not do that. But right now, after the war in Syria have been won by the Syrian Arab Army and its allies, and by the steadfastness of the Syrian people and the leadership in Syria, when that happened, and when you saw that the influence of the resistance is no longer confined to Lebanon, actually it goes beyond Lebanon to Palestine, Syria, Baghdad, Tehran, and down to Sana'a and Sa'da and up to Ma'rib, where you're so afraid to lose. When you saw that all of this region is actually becoming an allied forces of the resistance. I hate to call it the axis of resistance, because axis means there's another, it gives out the notation that it is something that either illegal or that should not be in place, or that something that's just going to stay for a couple of years and just disappear. No, it's the allied forces of the resistance of the native population of West Asia. This is who they are. So if you don't like that, despite the fact that they have been telling you for the past 7 years to stop the unnecessary, absurd war on Yemen that is taking so many lives for absolutely no reason other than you being a warmongering psychopath with no real vision of what is good for your country and your people, then by all means, this is your problem. It has nothing to do with us. We decide, each one of us decides what will happen in their own country. We have elections, by the way. We're democratic, unlike other rogue regimes in the region. So we decide what we want to do. Right now, they're fully opening to the Syrian government in Syria and trying to make amends and trying to find a place in the reconstruction process of Syria. But they want some sort of leverage somewhere, and they couldn't find except Lebanon and Iraq, because what's going on in Iraq is very, very important. So they found leverage in Lebanon, they found leverage in Iraq, but I think that they have not found sleep since the footage that we saw in the Sea of Oman between the Navy of the Iranian Navy and the US Navy. So
Yeah.
until we have some sleep there and they sleep on it and get some sense back, I think that this is the most that they can do. This is the last card that they could use to punish the Lebanese people for their choices. Yes, our choices. Yes, we have people who don't support the resistance, but the majority does. Get that into your thick head, Saudis, Al Saud, actually, not Saudis, Al Saud, and get yourself together, get your house together, prepare for the upcoming phase in the region, or else you won't be part of that phase.
Absolutely. I want to leave the audience with one very last question. We'll start off with you, Marwa, and then we'll move on to Hadi. If you were both in pivotal positions of power, well, I can't really say president or prime minister at the moment because you wouldn't fit the criteria. But suppose in a hypothetical world where it wasn't based on sectarian lines, what would be your main priorities to focus on that you feel like will take Lebanon out of the state of dependence that it is in terms of being captive to external powers, and how Lebanon could strengthen itself? If we can start.
Well, I would begin basically by changing the entire plan of what is called as the salvation plans of economy in Lebanon, because all salvation plans that are presented by each government, whether the proposed supposedly government that never was birthed by Saad al-Hariri, or the Hassan Diab one, or now the Najib Mikati one, is to get more loans. I would put in jail anyone who says a loan. Basically, I would start by creating an economy from scratch as if we were just born yesterday. I don't care. We need to pre-plan everything, and we need infrastructure, we need electricity, we need medical care, and we can do that with the friends we have. That does not mean that we can get that for free, but by all means, we have studied economy and we know what management is. And there are hundreds of ways where you can actually bring up a country. I would get a couple of consultants from Malaysia, a couple of consultants from, for example, from other countries from Russia, from countries
Eastwards.
that were below the line of economy, were hit by financial crisis, and they were able to redeem themselves in less than 20 years. This is what I need. I need to know what they did, and we all know what they did. They basically cut all sides of cost and all corruption. They cut the hand of everyone who is a treachery, who is a treason to the country. They cut everyone who tries to influence the internal political decision, the private internal political decision that should be done inside of every country. So basically, it's a whole plan, but start by changing the mental model of the people that you can make it, you don't need to import it.
Absolutely. Hadi?
The first thing I would do, because I'm a person that cares a lot about culture and country, national, like identity and stuff, I would change the education system. It's the first thing I would do, because there is no change with our youth inheriting all this sectarianism, all this division, all these different identities. I would make one history book, one identity, one perspective when it comes to Lebanon, with all our differences that can be joined together. I would do that. And then second, I would move to economic wise. I would ally myself with the East, China, Russia, any country that's able to help us get out our resources and explode them, help us build factories, give us electricity, recycling water, whatever we need. Anything that the West can do the East can do for us, we take it. Even if the West wants to help,
and
there's
we can
going to be
actually pay
conditions.
for that. For the past 35 years, we've paid $40 billion for electricity, and it costs $4 billion to build a nuclear power plant.
And it keeps cutting down an hour every year.
Very relevant points you raise, but of course, domestic security is also very important. This idea of the silm al-ahli and this idea of being able to protect yourself from external threats.
We didn't say anything about that because we have Hezbollah, and we know that they're wise enough that they would not allow any internal conflict.
As long as they have the upper hand, there's no civil war in Lebanon.
Marwa and Hadi, thank you both so much. Before I let you go, where can the audience find you? Starting with you, Marwa.
Well, you can find me on Twitter. I'm majorly on Twitter at Marwa 2_Osman. And I have a YouTube channel that you can find me there, also Marwa Osman, on my show on Press TV. I'm currently banned for like the 17th time, upteenth time on Facebook, so you don't find me there. Twitter is the place for me. I'm not an Instagram person. I don't have TikTok. So.
Okay, that's good to know. So Twitter at @_Marwa Osman. Perfect.
Yes.
And you, Hadi?
Hadi, you can, first of all, you should all follow Marwa because she's the best person I follow on Twitter, because seriously, like when I see her tweets, yeah. And you can find me on Twitter at Hadi Nasrallah, or on Instagram if you want to have a laugh at my stories. I don't post, it's just the stories. It's like where I do most of the sarcastic commentaries. You can find there Hadi Nasrallah _.
Honestly, I can't wait to see you both in positions of power. I root for you guys to be the president, the next president.
I just want to go back to the country and just deal with my chicken and my goat, and I don't want anything.
So we wish to live in that utopian. Absolutely. Thank you both so much. I really appreciate your time, especially Marwa, the difference in time. I know it's 11 o'clock in Lebanon now. 11,
it's fine as long as the kids are sleeping. It's fine by me. No worries at all.
Thank you so much.
In bed. No worries.
Honestly, means a lot. And thank you so much to the audience for tuning in as well. We really appreciate it. We hope you found it beneficial. And please remember to keep the oppressed in your prayers. Peace, love, and solidarity. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.